battle stations. Camille, get in front of the Archemy. The Rick Diaz team will split and take the flanks.
I understand. Zeta Gundam, Camille, let's do it!
Mobile Suit Gundam vs. Zeta Gundam. It's one of the very few Gundam games I have ever been able to get my hands on, because, as far as I'm aware, they are very hard to find in North America. And I'm glad I got this one, because it reminds me of something very familiar. Now, the story to Zeta Gundam is, well, that of Zeta Gundam. It follows the show pretty accurately. But what's interesting is it starts out immediately by showing you the very last events of the show. It is then up to you to start at the beginning of the timeline and piece together the events that took this weird, sort of spoiled, whiny kid into some sort of crazy mech warrior type guy. But the neat thing is, once you finally finish the timeline, you can go back to various points in the timeline and change various events to see how the end result would have changed altogether. Moreover, virtually every important and many of the unimportant characters in this series all have their own sort of campaign that follows this structure, starting out with one simple path and then spiderwebbing out into several different ones. Even more impressive, however, is when you clear one specific character's storyline, you unlock the entire one-year war story from the original Gundam. And then you can go through all the one-year war stories, and then try and change the events that happen, which in turn will of course affect the Zeta timeline, and creates a giant, massive, crazy spider web of storied events. So in short, basically what I'm saying is the campaign to this game is massive and awesome, and it's basically the entirety of what I'm going to be talking about, because this is basically all I spent my time playing with in this game, was just the crazy, massive, sizable campaign, just to see what few changes I could make would have on the overall story of Zeta. For example, if my boy, the kick-ass Ramba Ral, wasn't completely screwed over by Makuve and somehow managed to kick even more ass into the Zeta timeline, what would that be like? Well, let me tell you, he actually does have a massive, massive, massive story, and it's great. Also, Ramba Ral never gets enough credit, neither does the gun cannon. Who remembers that thing? That thing was awesome. Anyway, the biggest problem, of course, with the story is the fact that you have a lot of overlap with characters and events. For example, Roberto and Opoli basically share the exact same story path, and same mobile suits, same locations, and everything. And it makes sense to a large degree because a lot of characters took part in the same battles, but it does get a little bit tiring on you. Now, if you've seen anything on my channel, chances are you probably already noticed this about the gameplay. It looks suspiciously like a game I'm quite fond of, Gotcha Force. And there's actually a very good reason for this. This game was made by Capcom and is actually running on the Gotcha Force engine. Because of this, it actually shares a lot of similarities, mechanically speaking, with Gotcha Force, including the fact that planes are basically completely worthless, and that the fact is, well, I'm just going to point this out, the Gion is literally just a reskin for the Ruby Knight, complete with shield-mounted impact explosives. I mean, just look at this. It's the same character. I don't care what anyone says, except the Gion was stupid. Anyway, it shares a lot in common with Gotcha Force. The biggest differences are, of course, the fact that the camera has an optional lock-on system, as opposed to the constant one in Gotcha Force. And while this initially sounds like a good idea, it's actually incredibly flaky. Unless this game is trying to be a massive Hammurabi simulator where you can't see anything directly below you, your lock-on will spaz out of control, provided your opponent gets remotely out of your basic direct line of sight. So essentially, the lock-on is kind of worthless for keeping track of your opponents, which kind of defeats the purpose. A little bit. I've also noticed that compared to Gotcha Force, this game also plays a little bit slower, whereas Gotcha Force was a bit faster paced. But I think this works better when you're trying to, of course, show giant fighting robots as opposed to tiny palm-sized ones. Now, getting off the comparisons to Gotcha Force here, I have two other Gundam games, because, of course, for whatever reason, they seem to be pretty rare in North America. I'd like to get more, but I'd like to say that out of the three I have, this one hits a nice happy medium of how a Gundam game should control, whereas the other two are kinda on complete opposite ends. Like, just for a quick comparison here, Mobile Suit Gundam Journey to Jaburo plays almost sort of like a simulation of the very early episodes of the original Gundam. which is what it was going for. But this of course means that if you whiff an attack, you're going to spend about half an hour turning around to hit your opponent. And of course, fighting more than one opponent at a time basically means you're dead. But on the other hand, this game conveyed very well what being in a giant destructive robot was worth. They could take a decent punch, and they could definitely cause a great deal of destruction, and that was great. Now on the other hand, of course, we have the Dynasty Warrior Gundam games, where everything moves very fast and is frantic arcadiness. But at the same time, every machine feels like it's made out of wet tissue paper, and doesn't really convey the feel of a giant robot. Gundam vs. Zeta Gundam kind of hits the happy medium between the two. It moves fairly quickly, but at the same time, it definitely understands what it feels like to be in a giant, super destructive robot. You can bring down buildings, you can end up taking on several enemies at once because the battlefield generally has at least 5 opponents on it at any one time, but you can also very easily get overwhelmed. Because of this, you have to still play somewhat strategically and not just go crazy with it. Fitting into that strategy are all the mobile suits, because many of them all control differently. There's also an insane number of different mobile suits to pilot. There's about 100 different mobile suits, and, well, yeah, a lot of them are simply an equipment swap, like, say, a Zaku with a machine gun versus a Zaku with a bazooka launcher. If you saw a mobile suit in either the original Gundam or Zeta Gundam, you're gonna find it here, and it's gonna be fully playable. And yes, this does mean you can, in fact, stomp around Hong Kong in the Psycho Gundam. And it's surprisingly unfulfilling, but that's mainly because the Psycho Gundam has some weird melee range. Seriously, with the Psycho Gundam, you can only hit enemies 4 feet away with you with its punch. If it's 1 to 3 feet, you're gonna overshoot it, and if it's 5+ feet, you're just gonna miss. That was a bit weird, but there's some really amazing stuff with this game, like the ability to shoot behind you with the Hyakushiki, or like the crazy super particle beam laser that the Hyakushiki also gets. In addition, these machines aren't tied to any specific faction. For the story mode, yes, but you can actually get different variations depending on different factions. Like, if you wanted to see what a Titan's Zeta Gundam would look like, you can get one. Or if you want to see what a Char custom Zagok looks like with an AU paint job, you can totally do it. It's very cool like that. In addition, they even managed to sneak in a couple mobile suits from Double Zeta, which was never localized in North America, and I'm fairly certain they actually didn't have the rights to include them. But they did anyway, and it's awesome. The one final thing I've noticed about gameplay with this is, again, like Gotcha Force, it has a hypermeter. But weirdly enough, it has 3 different types of hypermeter. You have to pick one at the start of the battle. You can have one that increases your overall attack power for about 10 seconds. You can have one that increases your overall speed for about 10 seconds. Both things that had to do with the original Gotcha Force hypermeter. And then you've got a third one which is basically just straight up better than the rest, so I don't know why you'd pick it, which allows you to automatically revive when you lose all health, but at the cost of some of your combat capability. For example, if I was piloting the Gundam Mark II, died, auto-revived, I'd be missing my left arm. Now this initially isn't all that much of a problem because you use your rifle and beam saber with your right arm, and you can still use your completely useless Vulcans with your face. But as soon as you run out of ammo with your beam rifle, you can't swap charge packs with your left arm anymore. So, you now no longer can use your beam rifle. And there's lots of other neat little strategic bits like that just require you to understand what's going to happen to your mobile suit when you revive. Now, as good as this revive is, there is one massive problem with it. Allies can use it too. Now, on defensive missions where, you gotta save your partner, or you automatically fail a mission, I can see the value in this. But the problem is, oftentimes I'd find myself fighting a very high-powered enemy with like 1 health left, and in my head I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna take 1 hit, I'm gonna revive, I'm gonna hit this guy and he's gonna go down. Wait, why am I not dying? Why am I not reviving? Why is that generic Zaku number 4 reviving? Why am I dead? Damn you, generic Zaku number 4. You never even had an established storyline. You weren't even a relevant character. And yeah, all the generic characters and random grunts can also use this, and there's no way to override it, which means if one of your generic characters dies when you have a full meter, they revive. And of course, because they're weak and useless, they basically die instantly, wasting your meter. That straight up sucks. The overall visual design of this game is quite nice. All of the machines you'd expect are here and look how they should, and all the landmark areas over both series are also here. The biggest problem with this is, of course, that there is a lot of overlap, and there's still only about maybe 24 stages, if that. So you will be visiting each stage several times. But that said, you can also recreate any moment from the series that you want if it's not recreated in the story. So somewhere along the lines, there's something of a balance here. All the characters look how they should. I was impressed that all the original Gundam characters have both their classic design as well as their Zeta Gundam redesign. The audio design for the most part is fantastic. Literally every song from both Gundam and Zeta Gundam are here. And yes, this does mean you can stomp around Jaburo in a Char custom Zagok, all while jamming out to Soldiers of Sorrow. And yes, it's just as awesome as it's always been. The voice acting is tremendous. They really went above and beyond the Call of Duty when it came to voice acting here. Not only did they bring back most of, if not all, the voice actors from Zeta Gundam, but they also got back the entire cast of Gundam. So if, for whatever bizarre reason, you prefer Zeta Gundam Amuro to Classic Amuro, you're covered. But if you prefer Classic Amuro played by Katra, well, you're still golden. Basically, the audio design in general is just top-notch with this game. They've got everything you'd want and expect from this game, as well as just really capturing the essence of both Classic Gundam and Zeta Gundam.
This is no Zaku, boy! No Zaku!
Seriously, this game is awesome and you should absolutely grab this. If you're a fan of Gundam, you'll enjoy this. If you're a fan of Zeta Gundam, you'll enjoy this. If you're a fan of Gacha Force, you'll enjoy this. If you're a fan of this, go play Gacha Force. Go play Gacha Force in general, is basically what I'm saying. But the fact is, this game is excellent. And just to point out how amazing this game is what got me into watching Zeta Gundam in the first place. But I'm still gonna stand by this. It could have been improved with one quick, simple action. Somehow opening some sort of weird plot time dimension hole and bringing Duo in with his Death Scythe. Now that Death Scythe Hell crap, no, Death Scythe Hell looked ugly and stupid. Just like Wing Zero looked ugly compared to Classic Wing. Seriously, who removes a set of wings to give something a jetpack? It just looked ugly. But seriously, add Duo, get him played by Scott McNeil, bring in the Death Scythe. This would be the best Gundam game ever. Until then, this is still the best Gundam game ever. Go get it. And I'm gonna slowly cry over the fact that they've actually made several more in this series and they only ever released one more in North America. But before I go, I'll leave you with one last piece of advice. No matter how cool fin funnels may seem, for the sake of all that is good, don't kill yourself with your own fin funnels. Because if you do, all the new types will just start saying bad things about you. And then no one will want to eat with you in the new type cafeteria. And then they'll watch your YouTube video review and they won't ever stop laughing at you. Not that I'm saying that from experience or anything.
You failed to become a true new type, Char! A mongrel like you must be told! Understand? Not yet! This isn't done yet!
You've made a poor choice for your final weapon.
So you're here, come on! I won't let you! What? Can't be helped. Retreating!